look at domestic matrimonial property. So going back to the original fact pattern, where we have Richard and Isabel with Sophia. And what we've got is a spread of assets across multiple jurisdictions. So here we have Richard owning a BVI company, which in turn owns an investment account in Singapore. And then separately, Richard owns land, as well as an investment account in the UK, as well as the domestic Malaysian assets. So what we're looking at is, from the context of the matrimonial sort of regimes in Malaysia, it's a few questions that we would ask. Does the concept of matrimonial community property exist in Malaysian family law? Is there a presumption of joint ownership of the matrimonial home? And are pre- and post-nuptial agreements valid in Malaysia? And here I'd ask Kim just to run us through, from a Malaysian perspective, whether or not these, how these questions can be answered. So leading off with the concept of matrimonial community property within a Malaysian context.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. In Malaysia, we don't actually have this concept of community property as such. We don't call it community property, but when a couple wishes to legally separate or divorce, when they go to a court in Malaysia, then the court does have the power to order division of the assets acquired by the couple during the marriage. So from that point of view, it may be taken to be, the same thing. So they don't call it as such the community property, but the court would look at the assets acquired during the marriage and take into account contribution by each of the party, whether in terms of money or in terms of work, and in terms of perhaps for a spouse that doesn't work, caring for the family, all those things will be taken into account in the court making a determination as to how to split the property acquired during the marriage when the marriage breaks down.
Right, and this is effectively a discretionary power.
It is a discretionary power.
So there's not like civil law jurisdictions where there's an automatic sort of division on the marriage, on celebrating the marriage. In Malaysia, really, you look at it after the relationship has broken down and they're trying to divvy up the assets in the divorce.
Yes, so yeah, so they do take into account all these factors that I've mentioned, right. As well as the needs of the children, of course, and the debts of the couple, that sort of thing.
Right, and insofar as the matrimonial home is concerned, this is always a perennial problem when it comes to cohabitees and also with obviously married couples. Does Malaysia rely on effectively trust law to work out whether or not there are actually shares outside of the divorce discretionary powers, or how does it work within the Malaysian context to work out whether or not the matrimonial home is itself owned in divisions?
I think Malaysia follows the English concept of trust law, being a common law jurisdiction. So the trust concept is always there and is always in prevalence. But I think when it comes to things like the matrimonial home, because there is a specific act that we're talking about, which is the Law Reform Marriage and Divorce Act of 1976. So the court and the judge would go in accordance with that act and the powers and the provisions set out in that act.
Right, right. And then this perennial issue of nuptial agreements. And this is something that's recurred across the whole series of virtual roundtables. And we just want to sort of understand from a Malaysian standpoint, what's the status of a nuptial arrangement with respect to a marriage breakdown? Do the courts slavishly follow them, or do they effectively not take them into consideration? What's the position under the Malaysian family law when it comes to nuptial arrangements?
Well, the concept of pre- and post-nuptial agreements, as you say, is now becoming a lot more common. And in terms of just the validity of those agreements, obviously, like any other agreements, if you satisfy the requirements for a contract, it is valid vis-a-vis the parties themselves. But the courts are not bound by these agreements, so they, to adopt your words, they will not slavishly follow the provisions in these agreements, and they will always use their discretion, and they may consider it, they may look at it and take into account that, you know, perhaps that was the intention of the parties, but they're not bound to follow it. And at the end of the day, it's up to the courts in using their discretion.
Right. Has there been any sort of seminal case that's revisited this recently in Malaysia, Malaysian law, or is this something that we are sort of waiting for to happen in Malaysia, a case that actually confront this whole issue of nuptial agreements?
I think we're still waiting for that seminal case.
Right, right, okay.